Good afternoon and good morning to some of you. I'd like to welcome you all to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is June the 21st, the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere at least. The days start to get darker from now on, believe it or not, almost midway through the year. I'm delighted to be joined by three of our regular guests today: Bora Bariman, a managing partner at Hormuz Straits Partnerships; Ali Al-Riyami, consultant and former Director General of Marketing at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals in Oman; and Victor Yang, Senior Editor at JLC Network Technologies in China. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. Bora, let me start with you and just get your take on where these oil markets prices seems to have been balancing out more or less. We had a bit of a sort of drop, relatively speaking, a drop this week, and many analysts that we've talked to in the last few days have said the market has finally stabilized into some kind of medium. Would you agree?
That's a very complex question. I don't know if I have the sort of insight to precisely answer that, but I would say that I have been thinking about the Fed's decision, especially to slow the economy with the higher rate hikes. And, the question to ask is really about elasticity. At what oil price do we prevent demand by growing by 2 million barrels a year, projected to go to 102 barrels per day next year? So that's the big question. Can people slow down their consumption enough to prevent these prices of energy commodities from rising as significantly as they have? And
it seems that has happened so far. The fact that the price stopped going up, let's say a few days ago, is, some people say, because the demand destruction is beginning to bite already in certain areas, maybe more than others, particularly in the developing world. That has begun, and it's yet to come, and very soon though in America and Europe.
That's clearly the plan. Jay Powell's speech last week was very impressive to me in that I wasn't expecting him to be so hawkish. He was reading from a news script that I'm not used to hearing. And I think the market was clearly affected by that, with the sell-off in so many of the indices. And he clearly stated that the policy rate as it is clearly below neutral. I think he said it's well below neutral. And he pointed out that, with the inflation target of 2%, his tool will be to move demand down. And in his words, in the US, he says there are 2 job vacancies for each person seeking a job. And so flatly, the current levels of unemployment, again, in his words, are historically low. So it could rise significantly for him to be comfortable with maintaining and adhering to the Fed's dual mandate of maintaining employment and price stability. It wouldn't be difficult for him to justify any major slowdown in demand or rise in unemployment because inflation seems to be target number one. Let's see if events bear that out.
Yeah, and there's lots of doubt over whether he has some leeway now, as you said, because of the employment figures. But will he take rates up high enough and so far as to really have any impact on inflation? And we'll talk a bit more of that later. Ali, welcome again. Let's stick to demand and talk a little bit about OPEC and have they been proven? They've been cautious, obviously, the last few months. Maybe they didn't have much choice to increase production, but they could have done something and they haven't. And indeed, that demand forecast is coming into play now, and they've managed to maintain the prices they want in the meantime. Is that going to continue? What difference will Biden's visit, do you think, make to the region on that front, on the oil policy front, first of all?
Well, we are always looking forward for any president, United States president, to come and visit us in the region. And he's most welcome, of course. And we hope that his meetings with Prime Minister, the Prince in Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, will be a successful one, and also with King Salman. But let's just go back a little bit when it comes to supply and demand and also the world economic growth. We hear sometimes from different organizations, they link the two things together, which is when you see there is a growth in the world economy, then you need to increase production to go in line with that growth. But now we see that many of these organizations, they have downgrade, and also they see some slowdown in the world economy. So obviously, then the demand for oil it will go inside with this growth basically. So if we agree on that, then I think there is no such a hurry to increase our production at the moment. If the figures and if the relationship between the two things goes together, then I don't think that there is enough justifications for why we should increase much more than what it is available at the moment. Let alone that, as you have just said, that OPEC, I don't think they have the capacity to increase more than what they have already did. There are some few countries that they can do that, but in totality, we still see some conformity levels are very high, and this is one of the indications shows you that OPEC, other countries in OPEC, that they are not really fulfill their production requirements, and that's why we have the conformity is very high. So yeah, let's hope that things are getting better. The lockdown in China and also the crisis in Europe, the prices are going up. Everything is expensive these days. Not only the fuel, but even food now it become very expensive. So the whole situation, it doesn't really give us any good indication of growing the supply, growing more production, or adding more barrels in the market at the moment. I don't see that.
And of course, Saudi, even if it might have, for example, Saudi may have some extra barrels, they do want to keep a bit of spare capacity for the next potential point of tension that may surface.
Don't forget that we are getting, sorry to interrupt you, but don't forget that Saudi Arabia now it's a summertime and they need more barrels for their own power and the consumption and so on.
Of course, with temperatures rising and the AC usage, etc. Victor, welcome again. Let's go to China and let's talk a bit about demand. I mean, China's been taking, in terms of Russian crude, that's obviously sanctioned now officially since earlier this month. China has been taking a lot of Russian crude at these great prices in May and June. So far, it's taken even more than before. Do you see that continuing at the same rate?
Yes, well, we expect this to continue at least for, until the end of this year, say, if the prices of other grades stay so high. And for May, say, Russian crude average $93.66 per barrel. That's about 15.1% below the grade from Saudi Arabia. So it overtook Saudi Arabia for the first time in 19 months as well. And this trend will continue surely for at least many months to come. Yes.
Okay, and I mean, and what's China planning to do in terms of taking in a lot of crude, maybe putting it into storage, obviously, and using it too much domestically in terms of refinery activity? What's happening on that front? Will China start to pump out a few more products for its own use domestically as the economy recovers for the region? I mean, it's got some great deals there at the moment to make some margins, but it's not really taking advantage.
No. Well, actually, domestic demand is not recovering so fast now. Say, diesel demand recovered faster in May, but the recovery has come to a stall now because of the hot weather, rain in southern regions, and the production recovery has also slowed down. So because it's recovered faster in May, so diesel demand is not growing at the moment, and oil giants had quite high stockpiles, but they are not exporting more gasoline or diesel because of the government's policies. Now, security, energy security.
Why doesn't the government give them more quotas if it's good, makes economic sense? I mean, why aren't they doing that? If it'll help economic activity, if it'll help bring money into the economy.
Yes, well, because, well, energy security comes first now. We face much more, greater uncertainties than before. So China is now making sure it can strengthen energy security. Say, well, for the first 5 months of this year, the country actually put about 1.2 million barrels per day of crude into storage at such high prices. And last year, when prices were not so high, it just put about 280,000 barrels per day into storage. So you can understand why, because for one thing, is forcing refineries to cut production when domestic demand is not strong. But most of all is trying to ensure energy security. Yes, and in the future, when its spare capacity is not enough, it's limited. When it's limited, it will slow down the purchase, because actually domestic crude runs are quite low now. It's dropped quite significantly on a year-on-year comparison. And we do not expect it to rebound very significantly yet in the near term.
Okay, Bora, let's talk about energy security, but in Europe, and obviously we have the whole Russia-Ukraine equation, and less or no Russian, very little Russian oil, obviously going west, going east, as we just mentioned. But then you've got, countries like Germany and Austria saying they're going to up their coal production again, because they have to, they have no choice. Where do you see that going? I mean, do you think that could be something that has a legacy impact beyond the current conflict, and also the nuclear argument as well? I mean, or is it just a temporary measure for the time being?
I think Europe and the world are hit by, so many policy contradictions and market distortions that are at play. We had the IEA telling us last year before the COP26 that no new oil projects should be funded as part of the global climate transition regime. But we hear this week that global oil supply will struggle to meet rising demand in 2023. We had, Biden and the whole ESG community in general, steering financial resources away from refining, away from upstream. But today we see, both, Biden berating the oil companies for not bringing more capacity online, and the European Union definitely turning to coal, which is the real carbon intensive fuel, right? This is the sort of, you could say, the hottest fuel possible. So clearly reality has required us to face up to these contradictions. And now I'm a bit hopeful. Let's turn it to the glass half full spectrum. We see the contradictions of policy. It's not standing up to the test in the face of inflation, war, sanctions against Russia. And as Victor says, nations need to look at their security of supply, because first of all, they need to meet the energy requirements of their own population, which feeds through into inflation across the board of goods, of food, of as we say in the UK, cost of living, and it's creating a cost of living crisis. But it's not sort of one person or one policy to blame. It's a number of policies, from the Fed policy, central bank policy, to the ESG policy and the energy transition, that needs to be resolved in a more sustainable basis. But that's not an easy balance. to strike clearly.
And particularly when you have short-term problems like this, that goes out the window. Andy, let's go back just a bit to Biden's visit, if I may. He's obviously coming. They obviously will talk about oil, and we may see something more official come from some commitment come from Gulf producers on that. But many people in the market are dismissing it at making almost no impact. Let's talk about Iran, another supplier that it was hoped earlier this year we would be seeing a resolution to in terms of getting them back on board, let's say. But this whole nuclear deal discussion seems to have almost disappeared. Iran is openly talking about enrichment again. Would you expect any impact from Biden's visit on that? Obviously, going to be discussing that, but without knowing what they're going to say, do you see any results coming out of the visit in terms of the Iran nuclear talks and where we may go there, given that Saudi is a big player in that now?
Well, let's hope that there will be some positive talks, but I don't think that there is any kind of a solution from this visit. I think the Iran nuclear issue, it's a very difficult and complicated one, and each one of the two discussing parties, they are pushing and pulling from their side. And instead of going the right direction, now we see that it's opposite direction completely. Not like it used to be 4 months ago, when everybody was expecting to sign, to have a signature, and also things should be better than what we see it now. But unfortunately, these things are linked to political situations, and linked to a different kind of play games by itself. So it is difficult to understand and also to see any kind of a light after the channel, through the channel. Not yet. I think it will take more time, and it needs more than one visit, basically, to try and resolve these issues. Yeah. And we hope that Biden will bring some solutions, not only to Iran. To remember that the Israeli conflict with Lebanon, yes, and also Palestine. It's a combination of so many issues that we have in the region, as you know. And we don't only want to tackle one and forget about others. We have to, to tackle all of them together in one visit. I think it is going to be difficult. So we need more than one visit to be able to at least see some tangible way forward.
Yeah, well, inshallah, as they say, but we'll see about that. Victor, just back to you well, let's talk about Iranian crude. Of course, some of that has been flowing to China consistently while Iran has been under sanctions. And it looks like Iran is going to remain under sanctions for a while and become more entrenched in that sort of gray market along with Russian crude in the months to come, at least. Where does China fall on that one? How much Iranian crude are you still seeing flowing into China, or has Russia kicked Iran out essentially from your interest?
Well, for now, official data do not show much imports from Iran. As you may know, some cargoes might be shipped first to other countries and then transshipped to China. So there's no official data showing how many cargoes China is importing from Iran now. But if the price average for Russian grade continues, it's quite possible for Russian crude to replace cargoes from Iran. For now, the price of Russian grades in May, as I said, was $93.66 per barrel, is the second lowest among all the grades to China, just slightly about $2 above those grades from Malaysia. But Malaysia are kind of blend cargoes, well, so the price are very close to each other. And if this price advantage continues, well, and in the future, if the price advantages expand, it will be more possible for Russian grade to make a bigger dent into the Iranian grade.
Bora, let's just back to Europe and demand, this sort of pent-up demand, this whole story of, well, why have commodities been pushed up this year, putting the Russian-Ukraine conflict aside. It is this pent-up post-COVID, pent-up demand in the West mostly, where you've got a lot of disposable income. A lot of summer holidays have been booked already, and we've got airline traffic chaos at airports because of staffing, etc., flights being cancelled because of that supply chain problem. But is the feeling in Europe that pent-up demand now has been factored into prices, into product prices, into jet fuel, into gasoline, etc., and so that once we come out of the summer, we're clearly going to go into a more bearish period for oil and product prices? I mean, what else could possibly push things up beyond this?
Well, how much of a driver of these global commodity prices is European demand? I'm not sure. But,
or even US demand. Let's throw America into that.
You know, what I'm seeing is this. We talked about the K-shaped recovery 1-2 years ago, coming out of the COVID lockdowns, where the liquidity went to people at the top and not so much to the people at the bottom. Now, what they were given was full employment, but not at great wages. And what I see now is, more of this strike action. As the Daily Digest indicated, you have strikes in Belgium, 70,000 workers on strike. We're going to have a rail strike today and Thursday in London. I think it might be nationwide. Clearly, this is disrupting the lives of everybody. But, why is this occurring? It's because the unions believe that they're not keeping up with inflation, and that other people are traveling around the world and perhaps they're having trouble putting food on the table, right? So it's natural to have these type of conflicts in a free country. So I think that it's this inflation issue and the wealth gap that is really going to come to a head across the world. I was looking at the digest, and some people were complaining about China again not exporting product to the rest of the world. But clearly, the Chinese policymakers have to deal with the same issues to keep inflation down as much as they can, given the resources they have at play. And otherwise, there will be more tensions that will be more difficult to handle. And final point, look at France, right? You had the parliamentary elections, and the new French parliament is more polarized between extreme left and extreme right parties. And this sort of global consensus candidate, Macron, the candidate that all the jet set people like, he's left more marginalized. Who's to blame? I don't think he's to blame personally. It is this situation that has been orchestrated, the lockdowns, the financial easing, the inflation, and now with the war and the sanctions on top of that, the guy at the bottom is revolting against cost of living. And what gives, I think, is ESG to a certain extent, with coal coming online in Europe to generate power. And they're also asking for VAT exemptions on fuel so that they can consume fuel at lower prices. So a lot of that global policy consensus has to be reworked.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, global policy consensus and also national policy, and a lot of governments coming obviously under extreme pressure on every front. We've got a question up there which actually addresses what we just talked about, the pent-up demand. Has it sort of run its course for this year? Yes or no? Have we seen, it play out in the first half, and really demand destruction will kick in, and then this inflationary impact is going to have a big picture. Just to go to you for a last word before I go to Ali, on that question of how much inflation and how much pressure governments are under because of it. We're not hearing in China, we're hearing more about COVID problems, and the opposite. We've got actually QE, quantitative easing in China, and the government's pouring money in again to get things going. Are there any concerns on inflationary aspects in China? Putting oil aside, you're getting cheap Russian oil at the moment. What about everything else that on the consumer side?
Well, on the consumer side, the inflation is not significant yet. And say, when we go and buy vegetables, well, prices are slightly higher than last year, but not like the UK or the United States, say maybe just about several percent. And it depends on different, say some vegetable price might have gone up by about say 5%, 10%, but it's not all the product prices. It's just some kind of some products, say maybe some vegetables, but not all product prices have gone up quite significantly. It's not like that.
Okay, and I suppose because of COVID policy, you haven't had a lot of transport costs coming into play, whether it's domestic travel or international travel. Ali, let's go to you and just talk about the Gulf. We have one article on our news bulletin there about international banks sort of not relocating, but upping their presence in the Gulf because of all the M&A activity, and everything's looking excellent here because of the oil price impact, and also the way the government expenditure is changing and how that money is being spent. What is the sense today for looking forward now through to the end of 2022, even if prices remain where they are and don't go up any higher or drop a bit? Where's the sensitivity on that positive story continuing, and what do you think would be a threshold for prices for Gulf economic planning?
Well, as you know, that this good prices brings back many ideas, previous ideas in the financial market to the region, which is a good thing. I mean, this shows you that there is a potential growth in the region, not only in the financial market, but also in the industry market. That is a good indication of a good, of the returns that we're getting, and also the revenues from the oil. So this is very good news, and we hope that the governments will have they have learned the lesson of previous years that which we didn't really too much emphasis on future investments rather than building up the infrastructure and so on, especially in Oman and the other regions that required more infrastructure. But nevertheless, I mean, now it is too early, by the way. We just started seeing some good indication about the price, oil price now almost like 6 months since we started seeing a really good returns from the oil prices. But we need to have sustainability on these prices for us to be able to plan better and to know exactly what directions to be taken. But nevertheless, I mean, all the directions, all the indications shows that there is a potential growth in the financial market. The international financial organizations, they are willing to come and invest again into the region, especially in countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Oman. So it is opening up. The agencies, other agencies that they are rating the countries differently now. The rights agencies in Oman, they have changed their position to more growth in the future. So everything shows that we are moving to the right direction, and this is basically because of the oil price.
Yeah,
and this is very dangerous, by the way.
That is dangerous, and also from a consumer point of view in terms of your customers. But what about, Ali, just to touch on in terms of inflationary impacts also? We're obviously feeling that start to creep into the Gulf through the dollar peg, first of all, and the rates. That's actually going to be a rate impact more. But what about inflationary concerns in the Gulf? Are you feeling that in Oman? We're certainly seeing it here in the UAE.
We do have that. We all feel the same pain, actually, not only in the region, in the Gulf, but also elsewhere in the world. So this is like a world phenomenon, rather than this is just only in certain regions. I think if we're talking about Oman, maybe the inflation is about 3 to 4% at the moment, and the cost of food it's went up maybe about 10 to 15%. Also, the airlines, tickets, hotels, industries. So everything went up. But do we feel it? Not yet. I mean, we take things like it is normal. But once we get into a serious thing and it started to affect our pockets, then we realize that the inflation is there and it's a real thing and it is here to stay. As long as we have this crisis in the world, then I think it is going to continue, and the pain we will feel. Everybody will feel it.
Yeah, and Bora, just to go back to you to close off then on that point of we're all going to see inflation. The argument that whether you increase rates by another % or 2 or 3, even in America, in the Fed and the central banks follow, that's still not going to bring us down from 9% to 4% inflation. So is there really any point? I mean, inflation is doing the job on its own in bringing demand down ultimately. What is the argument today in terms of the argument against putting rates up further than making the debt situation even worse? Why don't we just let us inflate ourselves out of this problem?
Look, I think we were trying to inflate ourselves out of a problem, and we got to the situation that we're in now. And we have to remember that quantitative easing was an extraordinary measure, never tried before in history, and that experiment has run its course for the time being, according to Chairman Powell. But the Fed policy is not everything. I think it's the main architect of inflation, but we still are living with war. Putin will make it difficult for Europe to fill their gas storage for the winter, and there is the impact of the Ukrainian grains and foods not making it to the markets that feed the world, and that is beyond the purview of bankers to solve. Leaders of the world have to be wise and solve their differences. It's easy for me to say that, but this is the situation that we're in. We need strong leadership to guide us through this period.
Well, one can only hope, I suppose, but it doesn't look positive in Europe anyway on that conflict front. But thank you, Bora Bariman, Victor Yang, and Ali Rehami for joining us today on the Markets Podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Diala.